wilderness aspect just a little bit with it, but you can hear the birds chirping, you can see the fields, you can see the trees, but you get an idea of kind of why they wanted to move up here. This is somewhat of it. We'll get to the other in a moment. I'm not quite there yet. But Hensley Settlement, initially there was about 500 acres on top of this mountain, and majority of that 500 acres, about 450 of it was actually cleared. They used about 300 of it for gardening, farming land. The rest was used for homes and different things like that. At the high peak of the settlement, there was around...
We're doing a little tour here at the Hensley Settlement in Cumberland Gap National Park. I'm going to catch up with our group for a little bit, but I just wanted to do a little intro for that. Having a pretty good time.
Taxes, they didn't necessarily want to pay the taxes on it. Haven't we all done that at some point when those rules, we're like, oh, you don't really want to do that. We don't really want to pay that. Kind of same concept. Reason I stopped here though, again, tree talk. And this tree here, does anybody know what it is? Has some nice curvy branches on it that are good for a few things. And good for honey too.
Oh, we have some of that in our... I can't think of it.
Sourwood?
No. I've had that guess twice recently, and I've never had that. Never had anybody guess sourwood. I mean,
plum?
Cherry. I said the answer. Sourwood.
Sourwood
Tree. What did you say? Is that
Sourwood.
what you said? Yeah.
What he
Okay.
said, yeah.
So sourwood tree, and sourwood, like I said, was used honey. They had honeybees up here too. Of course, honey was a sweetener. More commonly known.
This place is amazing.
Yeah. But do you know where the term service actually comes from?
We're talking about a serviceberry tree now.
So, in lifestyle like this, or anyone in the mountains, this tree would leaf out in the spring, and when it leafed out, they knew the ground would be soft enough to be able to bury someone. So that's actually where the term, it went from sarvis to serviceberry, is because of that. Really the Appalachian lifestyle, the mountain lifestyle, is where that term came from. These that are right here, known as split rail. Now these split rail, there's two different types of split rail. You see this, and then you see the zigzag. And most everybody has seen the zigzag split rail fence, but this fence right here around us was either used as a route or it was used around animals, either to keep animals in or keep animals out. Very common. They also had oxen up here too.
A hay rake.
Usually something like this was a mule. Cumberland Gap had trade days back in the day, and they would take things from here and they would go off to trade days and trade until and come back with what they needed. Well, this wool was very common. It was a huge item at trade days. They would take it down and trade. Well, there was actually a gentleman from Biltmore Estates come and bought quite a bit of wool from them and took it back to him.
Yep. Very enjoyable little mountaintop.
Well, we've had some work done to it, so we have some fairly new wood. Quite a bit of cedar too. So that's what you're getting the whiff of in here. Now, this is, like I said, woodworking shop, blacksmith shop, and this was like the main hangout for the guys. This is where everybody came to hang out and work and do what they wanted to do. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and that was the aspect of. And you think about it. No matter what our lifestyle is, we all kind of have somewhere we kind of go and, whether it's your friend's house or family or, store, shopping, whatever, we kind of have those hangouts that we go to, and that's kind of what they were doing here. But back in the day, another type of wood lathe was a foot pedal wood lathe. They could have been either up here at the time, and maybe even both at some point. But it was a little bit cheaper to have a hand crank because, that meant there's two people, kind of like today.
Hand crank lathe.
Yeah, right. Go right ahead.
And
If you can do that, we'll take pictures and
handmade wooden
Guinness Book
platform.
of World Records there.
So case that wasn't mentioned a minute ago, this is the woodworker shop and a blacksmith shop. And she was saying that the Amish come in and have done quite a bit of repairs
I'll do that.
from Indiana.
Yeah, let's
So
not do that.
this one's being restored slowly.
Well, my name's not Brittany today. Mountain Laurel. It is a beautiful, beautiful gift. They actually just had Mountain Laurel Festival in Pineville this past weekend. Does it smell?
Little spring house.
What did you want to keep dry? Wood. Those were,
The woodshed,
yeah, because we done a fall volunteer thing.
or a woodshed.
I made an apple sack cake with those apples for that one. And this one was still standing, still a very nice cabin until the early 2000s. And somebody got caught up here in the winter storm, tried to start a fire in the fireplace, and that didn't work out so well. So it is sad. We are able to restore and fix buildings that are still standing, but it is about near impossible for a National Historic Park to rebuild a historic structure. I mean, unfortunately, but we've talked about doing, you can do all these tablet things and that, create a virtual look of it, but this was one of the most modern cabins up here, and very unique in its own standing. So this was the living area over here, and then you had to come out on the porch, go back into the other side into the kitchen, which was very rare. And to even have a kitchen itself in your home, besides just the fireplace, was unique back in the day. That was a huge ordeal. And they would be able to pick apples out of this apple hole and give them to their kids just as fresh as the day they put them in there. And the ingenuity to figure something like that out just blows my mind. We don't think about things like that today. When we go buy food, we don't think of how to preserve it. We just throw it in the refrigerator,
apple
put it on
hole.
the shelf, whatever, and go on about our day. But
Apples and
whatever you
sawdust
cooked up there,
mostly,
you had to
kind of
figure
like a
out
root cellar.
Whatever you grew, whatever you cooked, you had to figure out how to preserve it. And so, back to preserving things, we see the chicken coop over here. Chicken coop was mainly for eggs, because you had to have eggs for baking. But if you killed a chicken, you could eat it within a day's time with the big families they had up here. Usually it took 2 or 3 to feed some of the families. But anyhow, it was something you could eat in a day's time. Cattle was usually just for milk cattle.
And she was just saying, past the chicken coop, right over here,
Be able to do enough to produce, have a cornmeal, but they attempted it.
is
A meal to grind corn.
the outhouse.
But anyhow, they attempted it at some point.
On the
There wasn't
outskirts
enough
of the
water
settlement.
source, and they didn't
Good
have enough
fitting
corn
place
to
for it.
produce both. So what little corn they needed for meal, they would take off the mountain and have ground and brought back up. So that didn't last
It's just beautiful up here.
They at least attempted it. They're not unique. They're not
Mill wheels and the corn crib.
It's moved out over time too, for that to work. And you done whatever you could to make whatever you needed work. Now you can walk on in, just be cautious. That we perceive, and
Nice
I always
little
thought
sled.
people are smart in their own way. No matter who, where that, they're smart in their own way. They have their own things that they're smart about.
Excuse me.
We're not all the same, and we're not meant to be the same. We're not all
Yeah.
we're not all meant to know the
Little
same.
wagon that she said just stayed on top of the hill here. It didn't go down to the communities.
And then we were talking about the original hay rake. That's what this is over here. And then, quick on your feet,
So
I guess
she
you
was
could
just
say.
telling us that this
But,
bottom
to put shingles on,
foundation
they
log
usually
right
put a
here,
runner board that runs
still
from
the
one side
original
to the
board.
other, or a couple
It's
boards that
American
connect them in
chestnut.
between, and they would
It's
walk
still
on those.
pretty solid today.
And that's what they
It's
do
like
today.
knocking on a
So
door.
when the Amish
Is
come out and do it,
very solid.
even though they're using, we've got
And
them
this
using
is the
modern
big
equipment,
barn that
but
we were just looking at.
they speed that up a little bit, but yeah.
And another old hay rake. She did tell us that this one is original to the site, yet the first one was not. And that's pretty awesome. I love mountain home, mountain folk type of settlements, places.
We don't think about it. I never know the difference in the taste, really the taste of meat.
Hog crib.
We know what meats are, but to really know the difference. So that's the reason men had an excuse to go off the mountain. But women would go off every 6 weeks. Now somebody's made the fact of raising your family away from the new age ways. Well, the kids, women who were meeting young men at church services that they had up here, people would come all over. They would have thousands of people up here at church services.
We are coming up on one of the first cabins we've shown from a distance, but we're coming into it now, and I forget the guy's name who lived here. Liege. But he was one who had left the mountain and then came back. So his cabin has some modern, for this era, amenities to it. So I'm kind of neat to check it out.
He got a little creative too, because he didn't want to use the rock, waste all the rock that he had to build up a chimney that he didn't really need. So he put the log, and then they would use the top, that shelf there, for drying like beans or apples, things of that nature, because that rock would also draw some of that moisture, but the heat would too. And they'd put pies out on that shelf, a lot of times letting them bake just in the sun. But this was very uncommon to have. This is the only one that actually has a cook stove in it, was this cabin right here. And then your other little fancy dancy thing that they had. What's in that window right there that you've not seen anywhere else? Glass, yeah.
Huh.
So Lodge, come into a little bit of money too. Of course, he was one of the big moonshine runners. And take note of the owner of the house here. You can easily, I can't hear the difference in them most of the time. I don't have a
Oh, that's the big board you were talking about, isn't it?
Well, that's one of them, yes. Yeah. So this is the cabin I was talking about, original boards. You look over here, look how wide they are.
You're right.
I mean, and look how smooth. You can tell the difference in the older ones. These are more narrow, so they're newer. But you see the shaving mark, the carving marks in them. You don't see them in the old boards. But we were talking about, I told you to pay attention underneath the house. So what do you think this board's for right here? Do you notice this hook on the end?
Yeah, it can open.
Okay, opens up. Used it like kind of like a root cellar.
Oh, yeah.
But Lodge, this was his escape route. He would drop down here. Law would knock on the door. He'd drop down here and run out the back, and he was gone before they ever knew he was here or gone.
Oh, that's cute.
Wind it with your fingers and make a thread out of it, or use it as fire starter. And so that was very commonly used, and they used yucca for medicinal purposes too. If you see yucca plants in the mountain, or these plants in the mountain, that means there's been a homestead there usually at some point. There may not be a homestead there today, but there's yucca plants.
So just before I turned the camera on, she was explaining some of the uses of yucca. And it has a cotton-like seed pod that can also be processed into thread as we would use cotton today. And we are coming up on the schoolhouse, which is also where we started the tour. And likely where we're gonna finish it, I'm guessing. And picnic tables up here. We brought little lunches, and so this is the schoolhouse.
The last schoolhouse, it was pretty run down when it burned, but it was pretty much gone by that point. But they rebuilt it.
Oh, look at the little desks.
This is awesome.
The wood stove is my guess.
Your wood stove's your guess. What is everybody else's guesses? What's the original piece inside the settlement, or inside the schoolhouse?
Inside the house.
Yeah.
Cowbell.
No. Chalkboard? Chalkboard. It was the only thing that survived the fire, and it was moved from the original schoolhouse over here.
Oh wow.
that back. It don't come back all the way. There you go.
Oh wow, it's pretty good size.
So this is a pretty good sized cemetery. Now Sherman and Nicey Ann had 19 children, 10 of which are in this cemetery right here. And that whole family to be able to survive up here on the mountain, or in the mountains. And so 19 children to a young woman, they're not, they're not going to be able to survive that. I've seen people have 5 and 6 children, and they're, I've seen heard stories of Sherman,
the last cabin on our tour down here in this little bowl. And isn't that a peaceful place for a cabin now?
I mean, he was protecting his family.
Yeah, just a beautiful place.
I would think when you're living on a mountain, there's no
I missed the name. It is a Hensley. I think Finley, she said. It is a pretty good sized cabin. We picked mowing day to come up here.
Contemplate life, I guess.
Oh, it is a... Yeah, it is a... pretty cool little cabin.
The quilt rack hanging from the ceiling back here. So many wonderful, cool things. And we do apologize for the damage of the spinning wheel, but we have 2 fantastic, very new volunteers to Cumberland Gap. She spins and weaves, and he repairs the equipment. So, we're hoping to have it repaired. In an environment like this, we want to keep things up here, but then the mice get in and destroy it. So, there's...
So our tour just dropped us off a little bit ago. So back here at the information center and headquarters at Cumberland Gap National Park, and heading back to the campgrounds, finishing up our trip here today and heading out tomorrow. But that was quite the tour. It was very interesting. A small group. There's only 6 of us, and I think they said they usually do 10 and maybe 20 on the weekends, but most of the time just 10. So it was a pretty good group. Learned quite a bit. I do recommend it if you're in the area to check out the Hensley Settlement. And I want to thank you guys for watching. And we'll see you next time.